Hello and welcome back to this Zen Embodiment channel. Today we have Marilyn Beech with us, who was the first person to introduce me to the non-directed body movement. And that evening really kind of changed my life in a lot of ways. So I'm really happy to have her. I think Jean Laveau might show up also, who was with Marvin. We'll see if that happens, but we're in the beginning of our October intensive with this wonderful group of people from around the world doing these classes, and the non-directed is a big part of that. So I wanted to bring Marilyn on for a call and have it recorded. If any of you don't want to be recorded, or your camera, you can turn off your camera. That's okay if you feel like you don't want to be on the YouTube. Other than that, it's so great to have you all here and so great to have Marilyn here. Yeah, and I would just want to kind of maybe turn it over to Marilyn for a moment and see what she has to say. So great to have you here, Marilyn.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Marvin Solit was the first person to put a name to this kind of work and to kind of turn it into a thing. He came at it from being an osteopath and one of the earliest Rolfers that Ida Rolf ever trained in the 50s. And he worked in both professions for about 10 years in Boston. And I think the thing that bothered him about being a therapist working with patients was that he felt there was a power differential that was getting in the way of the patients getting better. He was coming at this from a healing profession point of view because he's a doctor. And he decided that the therapy relationship brought with it a whole lot of control problems and holding problems that got in the way themselves. So he set about trying to figure out what to do about this, investigated different things, and came up with this process that he called non-directed body movement. And I started calling standing around because it was easier to say. I don't know. It seemed more descriptive. And it was a little bit silly because this was such serious work. It seemed like it was nice to get silly once in a while. So I've been standing around, I guess, for 25 years. I don't know. So, and Jean's been doing it a lot longer. And I don't know if she's going to join us or not. But anyway, I thought I'd first start by asking you fellows, all ladies, if you've run into obstacles, problems, curiosities, questions, anything to start with. Let's just start with that. And if there's anything I can answer, I will. And you can raise your hand and maybe Corey will unmute you. Is that how this works?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing burning. Oh, good. Carolyn. Yeah.
Hello, and I'm so happy to speak with you today. It's a real pleasure. I read your book, and one of the concepts that really struck me was the next best thing. Like, what you're standing around, your body will know what the next best thing is. And I have to say, it's definitely affected my life. And I find that since I've been doing it, there are polarities that are happening when out in the world, and the next best thing is happening. It's very connected, and then I'm completely out of it. And so I don't know if it's growing pains of like trying to or wanting to stay in this sort of connection of where I am, where everything's going well. And then on the flip side, I'm like despondent and nothing's going well.
Yes, all that happens. The next bit, the problem with this work is there's no perfect place to get to. You get to a wonderful place, and that's just as momentary as all the awful places. And it's a process of getting comfortable with standing on shifting sands and being adaptable, which are so important for us. I wrote about the next best place partly because sometimes in doing this work, you get into kind of painful stuff, and it can be scary. You know, if people aren't used to pain and don't know where this is going. If you have faith, because at first you just have to have faith, that this stuff is going to lead you to the next best place. It's not going to take you into the next worst place. It's always going to go to the place where your system, in this second, in this moment, given everything that's going on, which includes everything in your environment, all the people, everything in your system, the shoes you have on, whatever, the state of your relationship, whatever, everything going on, your system will take that all into account without you having to think about it, because it's in touch with all that stuff all the time. And you're giving it, you're losing the control over all that stuff. You're giving up on it and letting your system take it away, do what it needs to do, and it will always go to the next best place. No matter how ucky it feels or how great it feels to your system, they're all the same thing. We put judgments on whether we like it or don't like it, which is fine. That's what our brains do. It's what we do. But our systems don't really care that much about that. They just want us to be secure, stable, adaptable to whatever is going on in this second. So it takes us out of a lot of our modern day left brain education and cultures, which have gotten a little bit top heavy, basically, you know. But that going from feeling really good to nowhere is, yep, that's part of the deal. But you can always know that even if you go to despondency, that's just the next place your body needs to take you in order to go to the next place. And unfortunately, I don't think you ever stay in a totally lovely place forever. I mean, maybe some transcendent enlightened master might, but I've never gotten there for very long. Yeah. Anybody else with? Did that answer, Carolyn, some of what you're?
Yeah, it definitely answered it. I guess you just kind of hope it's going to be a little bit easier, and just actually hearing you say that is the next best thing, and it sort of feels like that as well. I just guess I don't want it.
And that's fine. You can judge it however you like, but always it's like you want to look at those judgments and those thoughts and go, well, okay, whatever, I'm going to put that here for now and get back to what do I feel? What do I feel? What do I feel?
And one of the things that's been happening lately is I'm getting, and it sounds super weird even to verbalize it, that I feel like I'm getting information from my feet up. And so if I can not use my brain, it's filling me up in a very...
I don't know if I'm cutting out or I'm not getting Carolyn.
No, you're not. She's cutting out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you can answer that if she's. Yeah, she might.
Well, I think that, yeah, the info from the feet is great. If you're starting to get info from your feet, then you're getting your body awake again to bring all this interesting information to you. I can remember going out to Cambridge once to visit with Marvin and Jean, and I had been on the plane, so I had to go for a walk. I went over to a park and started walking around. And it hit me just out of nowhere that it had rained 3 days ago. And I thought, why did that thought come into my head? And I started really paying attention to what my feet were feeling. I was like, well, I don't know. So when I got back to Jean's house, I just asked her if it had rained lately. And she thought about it a while and she said, yeah, it rained about 3 days ago. Somehow my feet had picked up the feel of the earth, whatever, something, I don't know. And that translated back into enough words that my logical brain could pick up on it. But that didn't come from me being pondering it. I wasn't even curious about whether it had rained or what was going on, but it just showed up. And I think the more you do this kind of work, the more that kind of stuff just happens. And I'm not sure where that info is coming from. I've got my own theories, of course. I love to have theories, but no real info about it. Yeah. Did we lose Carolyn? It looked like.
Looks like we lost her.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to share their experience a little bit and or ask a question? Anyone else? There's a lot of experience here, a lot of experienced practitioners in a lot of ways. So they're bringing a lot to this call. So I'd love to hear from you.
I've got a bit of a question. I think a lot of people just struggle with getting their foot in the door with this practice. And I do understand, fundamentally that it's a letting go and a not knowing process. But do you have any advice for people that are just kind of waiting outside, trying to get into it?
Sure. It's, it's just a question of take your shoes off, stand up and shut your eyes and ask yourself the question, what comes to my attention first? What we're looking for is what comes to your attention first as a physical sensation. We started calling it felt sense in my profession after a while, which is pretty descriptive, I think. The reason we start standing up and going for the unwinding that will happen in a standing position is that one of the biggest relationships our bodies have is with gravity. It's a big, hunky, 62 feet per second squared, pulling straight down. And these systems have to be able to stand on 2 feet. 2 feet is difficult. Everybody is asymmetrical, no matter what we think about it. We're not evenly balanced. So balance in a gravity field is always a matter of staying in a little bit of motion, one foot to the other, moving around, whatever, tiny, tiny little movements. That is how it's supposed to work. But then as we learn to walk, environmental effects like our parents or siblings having to put on a particular posture in order to stay safe. And then we go on to falls and falling out of apple trees and surgeries and car wrecks and sitting all day in front of the computer and bosses and kids and everything, having to make a living in a capitalist, difficult place. All these hits become physical hits as well. Everything emotional is also physical, and it takes on a stiffness and an immobility in our systems eventually. So what we do first is stand. And the first patterns that are going to unwind are the bigger patterns we put together to keep us standing on our feet in a gravity field facing that world out there, whatever it might be. So this can put us into all kinds of vulnerabilities. A lot of these holding patterns have a lot of emotion to them. But those big patterns, big outer patterns, have to unwind first before you can get to the deeper patterns that are more behavioral issues or cellular tissue issues, or say that one fast, or emotional things. They're deeply held. If you go for the deeper stuff first and you haven't gotten the outer envelope opened, they cannot expand. They can't go anywhere. You're going to be stuck with a a difficult conflict in your system. So first thing to do, we just stand, shut your eyes, and ask yourself, what do I notice first? And then you just keep your awareness on it. I think I run into people who can't feel anything at all. They have a lot of thoughts. Sometimes an emotion comes up. So this is fine, nothing wrong with that. If it's emotion, I ask them to try to find the physical part of that emotion, see what the body is feeling, if, even just a little tiny bitty thing, and track that. To just take the word off the emotion. Words are extremely powerful. If it's sadness, they go, well, okay, I'm feeling sadness, but I'm not going to call it that for now. I'm just going to put that word over here and go back to my body and say, what does my body feel right now? Most people can get into a physical felt sense through that route. Now, thoughts are a little, they're even more abstract than an emotion as far as your body is concerned. But that's okay. You can notice your thoughts again. What I do when my head is just like going on, and I can't seem to find anything else to pay attention to, is I will look at those thoughts and categorize them as in a bigger category of thoughts about kids who don't call their moms or something like that. I don't know, or somebody did me wrong somewhere in the past. So they're all thoughts about victim stuff or something, but put a bigger category to it that kind of distances you from the little details, because the details are fun. You know, we just have fun with that stuff, and it's very seductive, and we can just get stuck in all that and go round and round, 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 round. So you make it a bigger category, and you keep checking to see, well, now, am I feeling an emotion with this? Probably. So you take the emotion, you label it, you take the label off, you put it over to the side. What do I feel? What does that feel? What am I feeling? Eventually people can get there. Now, I have had people who just can't connect into their bodies. They've had a trauma, maybe a trauma they don't even know about, but something that's pulled them outside their bodies. They're beside themselves, basically. It isn't that they don't want to get in their bodies, it's that their bodies have shoved them out because something horrible happened. So you just stay with it. You just keep noticing where your head's at. What's going on in your head? Sometimes you can just start feeling skin stuff in your head, or the intensity of your eyeballs as they're focusing on a thought. Clench your jaw, stuff like that. Yeah, I had a lady once in Missoula who was like that. She could only feel from here up. She really could not feel anything in her body. We did standing around, I don't know, quite a few months. And then suddenly she was like, oh my gosh. She just kept saying, oh my gosh. I'm like, what are you feeling? She says, I feel something. I don't know what it is. I said, well, that's okay. It's no words about, no interpretation, just what does it feel like? You could see her body relaxing. Well, I don't know if relaxing is not the right word, but like coming down towards her feet, and her feet starting to access the ground. It was really quite remarkable. And it was interesting in the months after that, all the old friends she had went away. She started making new friends. She quit her job. She got a different one. Everything in her life just started really changing kind of organically without, being a big decision-making job. It just started, things drifted away that didn't fit who she was now, and other things started coming in. But does that answer a little bit, Brian? Is there a specific, anything specific you could example of not getting in there.
No, I mean, I think that's perfect. I think for me, when I first started this, I've been doing it for a couple of years now. And I have a Zen practice prior to that and meditation for years. I had this very like oceanic experience or like undulating experience. And I think when non-directed really first came online for me, it's like that was happening, but I knew that to begin with. But I had to like kind of pin in on, it's like, okay, this undulation's happening, but where is that coming from even? And then it basically started from my feet up too, which is interesting. What Carolyn's saying is I listened to that and it took me, like down through my hip, down into my ankle. And then I kind of got like the Elvis leg thing going on. And those were my sessions for like a good solid month and a half, was just this like vibration from the ankle upwards. And like that, yeah, that was interesting just to learn how to listen, like even if having this thing going on by itself, but learning to listen to where that might be coming from, if it's the whole system reacting to it too. But no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fascinating what our bodies will do when we stop controlling them for a while. Marvin had a metaphor he liked to use of a factory full of factory workers and then supervisory people. And the supervisory people are like our left brain, giving orders constantly. You do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, you do this. And the workers doing the jobs that have to be done. And you can count on the fact that they're down there thinking, well, we could do it better this way, or we could do it better that way. And we don't really need to take all this time to do that. We could do this, or we could do that. But do these people want to hear it up here? No, they want to tell you what to do. So this is like turning that control over to the whole system and let it finally lead the way. It's not like it's going to take control. It's more like, oh, we're all going to participate now. Everybody's going to participate. And the purpose of the whole brain, the left brain, neocortex, is to watch and observe and finish that feedback loop of action, observation, action, observation. It's self-reflective feedback loop, which is interesting. I've come from an anthropology background way long time ago. And human evolution has been just kind of fascinating to me. And I look at the evolution of the whole animal kingdom going on and see that what's really different about Homo sapiens is our ability to do this self-reflective consciousness thing. And I've just been so curious about why did that come up? What's so great about this? I mean, there's something great about it. And we misuse it a lot. I mean, we've used it a lot for control and power over, and done some pretty bad things with it. So what's it good for? How can we use it well? And in the standing around stuff, I have learned, and in my Rolfing practice as well, I have learned this, that the more observation you can give something without interpretation, without judgment, without directedness, just closing that loop of there's been action, let me observe it. There's been action, let me observe it. Closing that feedback loop makes a whole lot more stuff happen than if you just keep acting, or you just keep observing, or you just keep controlling. A lot more happens, and a lot more happens well, because the whole system is observing itself, and it will keep itself from doing something unhealthy. Systems don't like to be unhealthy. And it seems like, from my experience, that our little individual systems are in communication in some way, not verbal, of course, but some kind of information highway flows between us and everything else out there. So part of what we're doing with this is learning to be part of the whole thing instead of top-down control over the whole thing, which sounds kind of abstract, but when you do this individually with your own body, it's not abstract at all. It's like meat and potatoes, something like that. So after a while, a lot of people who do this stuff for years and years and years, a couple things happened. This happened to me. This was very interesting. It got me thinking about intention and directedness and non-directedness a lot. When I stood up to stand around the first few years, I had a rotational pattern that I kept going into. It was part of a whole short leg thing and ballet training and all this kind of holding stuff I had put together to keep a short leg from looking short. And kept going into every time I stand up, shut my eyes, twist, stand up, shut my eyes, twist. Just kept going on. One day I stood up, shut my eyes, and I noticed a little teeny weeny intention, very light, almost ghosting through my consciousness. Oh, we're standing up, start to twist. And whoa, this twisting motion had become a habit. I had created an unwinding habit, which is exactly what I'm really trying not to do, is create habits. I'm trying to get rid of them. So that was a big aha. And well, this is what our brains do. This is what our motor cortexes do. They get into a situation they've been in before, standing around on your own 2 feet, and unwinding a certain particular pattern. And so, okay, we're standing up, we're going to do that again. My brain made that connection and decided that's what we're always going to do every time we stand up. I didn't notice that little habitual neuron firing off for quite a while. It was kind of a shock. And so then I came back to just standing straight. And that's all it took to stop that habit, was just noticing it once. And it didn't come back. And then other things started to unwind. Went the other way for a while, and other things happened. But that's something to notice. And I would be curious if anybody else ever notices something like that as well. And if you get into doing the exact same movement all the time for a couple years, maybe it might be time to just wonder, have I made a habit for myself? And then start over again. And if you have, it'll do something else. But that was fun. Let's see. I had a different. Any other questions anybody has here? Comments?
Oh, hi, Marilyn. I just wonder on, let's get my son to hold the phone. I'm driving here. On that notion of the habit, you're mentioning there, of that subtle unwinding that had become a habit. What about the idea of starting with slightly different novel positions at the time, a slightly different weighting, a slightly different position in relation to gravity, perhaps just a subtle movement of some sort as a source of an injection of novelty, such that kind of habit of unwind doesn't form, because you're shifting the context every time, rather than starting in the same way, the same standing. Would you think that would take that out by doing that?
Well, it'll certainly put you in a different type of unwinding, that's for sure. I think some of these patterns, like Brian was noticing, have to go through a lot of unwinding in order to get unwound. So knowing when you've done enough of that and when it's become a habit, that's a tricky one. And this is a tricky kind of work to do. I think that consciously purposely putting yourself in a different position, but it's an interesting thing to do, but I don't think I would do it in order to determine whether you've gotten into a habit or not. I think careful attention will let you know if you're getting into a habit. And then all you have to do is just stand up again, break yourself out of the motion, stand up, and it'll start doing whatever else it needs to do. One of the things that does happen over time, once people have stood up enough, is you come to the ground somehow. And often this will happen fairly soon, that some posture you're in will just slowly take you down to the ground. And so down you go. And unwinding will continue in a prone position or a keeled over position in whatever way it needs to be. Sometimes you take on postures that you had as a kid, that when something awful happened, or it was just a constant environmental, whoever your parents were, your siblings, whatever sort of milieu you were in at the time, you'll start unwinding some sort of posture that you took on at that time. There's even, I don't know what to make of this, and I don't know how to interpret it. All I can say is that maybe it's past life stuff. Who knows? I've had one crazy unwinding thing. I stood up, didn't notice anything. I was like, nothing, just this little teeny weeny tickle in my throat. So I went, okay, teeny weeny tickle in my throat. Bam, I was on the ground. I have no idea how I got there. And suddenly this movie started going on in front of me. It was a strange event in which I eventually died and came back. I mean, it was really nutty. The dying part was drowning in salt water. So finally, I was kind of over. The movie was over, and I stood up and went, "Oh man, what was that?" And I said, "Well, I'm very nauseous. I feel really, really sick." I had eaten my lunch just before I decided to start standing around. So I had a sandwich in here and everything. But I felt really, really nauseous. I grabbed the garbage can and I threw up. Did I throw up lunch? No. I threw up salt water. Lots and lots of salt water. No lunch, no bile, nothing. Like I usually throw up, if I throw up. I don't know what to make of that. I have no idea. It's an experience, so it happened. That's all I know, it happened. So this work is, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to make of that experience. But I tell you, after that, my diaphragm really opened up. I could hike mountains in Missoula without gasping and whatever. So that kind of brings up the whole notion of interpretation, which is tricky for us humans because these, poor little left brains, they love to interpret stuff. That's what their job is. They're supposed to do that. And they do that constantly. When some kind of unwinding happens, it might remind you of something that happened in childhood or a person in your life at some point, a relationship that went south, something. And it's really easy to take that little remembrance and attach it to that physical unwinding and make a whole story, bring up a history and go hauling off on a story forever. I think it's important to not get sidetracked by histories and interpretations, to go ahead and like a verb, a word for an emotion, just put it to the side and go, okay, let's just leave that here for now. That's fine. Let me keep paying attention to what I'm feeling and see what happens next. And because in the long run, it doesn't really matter what the story is. Really, the history doesn't matter. All that matters is how it's affecting you right in this second. And if that's willing to unwind and go away, whoa, how great's that? It's wonderful. Now, none of this stuff is going to affect you from here on out. Maybe this stuff is going to happen next will, but whatever's going to happen next is going to be a little different now because you're not dragging this past with you anymore. You're a little more open and adaptable to the moment. So any questions, comments, or interesting things that have happened?
Yeah, hi, Marilyn. Thank you so much for speaking. It's very interesting. But one of the things that I'm aware of is that in our efforts to do something that we hope will make us feel better, human beings, and myself obviously, are very good at taking that and then trying to turn it into, the next self-improvement project. And we bring those stories, those interpretations, and lots of ideas about whether we're doing it right or wrong, or we could do it better, etc. But it sounds from what you're saying that this practice, there's really no kind of right way, because every standing session ends up in a different place potentially, and that it's not. Are you kind of saying that it's not work that ever really finishes in a sense either, because you just carry on and kind of different pieces unwind, as time goes on, but you don't wake up one day and think, that's it, I'm done. Yeah, so could you say a few words about that, please? Thank you.
Yes. Yes, we do always want to be getting better, feeling good, etc. That's human. And I think this kind of work really challenges our notion of, it's a very Western notion of there's a perfect place to get to. I don't know who started that, but they say the Greeks, maybe. I don't know. But, and maybe there is a concept in Eastern religions too of enlightenment, which also, it sounds like a perfect place to get to, although I suspect those who got enlightened probably figured out you didn't stay there. That was just someplace on the way to anywhere else. But that's our kind of our medical perspective is we get you to a good place and you're supposed to stay there. And you're supposed to do like a certain kind of amount of exercise every day and eat these kinds of foods and get this much sleep and so forth, and you're going to be perfect. It's an odd concept. I like to listen to our indigenous people in the US speaking about what's important to them. And they come at all this from a totally different place. There's no right, wrong, perfect, black and white. It's relational. Everything's a relationship. Relationship with each other, relationship with the ground, with the squirrels, with the grass, with the rocks, with the clouds, with the rain. It's all relational, and you participate in this relationship, and it always changes. It's this way today, it's that way the next day, it's this way, and you participate. So this kind of work is taking us more into that kind of a perspective instead of the more Western orientation of step by step by step, we're getting better every day, and there's going to be a perfect place we get to. It's kind of more fun that way. It takes the black and whiteness out of it, the right way to do things, wrong way to do. When you have a right way to do things, it means somebody's telling you what that is, right? Somebody made that up, and they're telling you this is the right way, and you've got to go there. And they're going to show you how to get there. Hopefully, they will show you how to get there. But this takes that out of there and says, there's your way. What's your way? It individualizes it. Where's your body at? Where's your behavior at? Where's your system at? Where's your whole history at? And where's the best place for it to go right now? We don't know. Go over here, it'll zig here, it'll zag there. Maybe there's a big knot up here that needs unwinding, and you know it. But to go straight there is totally impossible. It'll be very violent to the rest of your system. Well, the rest of your system knows that. Maybe your head doesn't, though. It's like, I need to go here. Well, it's going to go here, and it's going to go there, and it's going to go here, and going to go there, and maybe eventually this just falls apart. And you don't really have to do anything about it at all. It's just being held in place by a bunch of other stuff. So I think it can be unnerving for people who need to be doing it the right way. There are people for whom that's the survival pattern they put together, is find out what the right way is and get that done. I was there for a very long time. I never really knew what the right way was, but I knew there was one. So I was totally confused, but this does challenge that. And that can be part of the unwinding, that there's an uncomfortableness with, oh, is this right? Is this right? Then you'll feel a little fear in there and a vulnerability. And so you turn that into your felt sense and just track it. It's totally safe, totally you. And you never get into big violent outbursts and big dramatic things. Just kind of disappears after a while. Yeah, but yeah, this is not very American kind of work.
Marilyn, first, thank you so much for speaking. I read your book a long time ago, and it's been really helpful. And what you were just saying made me think of, I've kind of been trying to think of how to ask a question about, like, there's the work we do in a standing session, and then there's the rest of the day. And it informs, like, often, I'll feel just a little more spaciousness, like, in time, like there's just not so much pressure. There's just a little more ease, a little more openness. And what you said about relating, that really makes a lot of sense. But I don't know if you could say any more about that. Like, what I fall into is then, like, I'm like, oh, now things are working better. I'm doing something right. I got to keep doing that. And then it backfires. Right. So how do you relate that, the work in the session and how it impacts your relating, your functioning the rest of the day?
Yeah, it's something that grows over time. I think a part of what's happened slowly over time is that I allow myself more of a pause whenever I've got a client around, talking with a friend, whatever, and I'm confused, or I don't know quite where I'm at with this. I'll just pause. And most people are fine with a pause. They can tell you're still relating to them. You're still with them. You haven't zoned out. And usually with the pause, there's enough space in the interactions for what's really going on to surface. And then you can talk right to that. So that's one way that I notice the effects of it going on throughout the day. And of course, they don't go on throughout the day. We get into interactions with people, and you got 500 things suddenly that are going on at once, and it's like, I was thinking about this morning. I was watching the sun come up and thinking how I miss seeing my eagles around, because I don't live in the same place anymore, and how those two eagles, I lived in an eagle territory for quite a while, and there was a couple that lived there. And when they weren't doing anything in particular, they would both sit in their perching tree together, bolt upright, just kind of at ease, but bolt upright. And then if something happened, it was usually the female that needed to be attended to. Man, she went horizontal. She stayed on the branch, but her head went forward here. Bam, she got long and skinny, and that beak opened up, and away went the noise, and beady eyes. she changed posture immediately. She went from what I would say non-directed attention to everything going on in the world right then to that needs to be done. Total directed, single point attention to this needed doing. And then the guy would take off and go do it. It's kind of a nice setup. But I don't know, that's the ego thing, I guess. But it was fascinating to watch these animals who could go from total immediate attention to everything to absolute pointed directed attention. That was fun. So we're not going to stay in a non-directed mode all day, that's for sure. We do have to plug in our intention once and get something done. There is that. And sometimes we have to do it really fast, like that eagle. You know, there's a hawk in the territory, get that puppy and get him out of there, you know. But I think when we have unwound a lot of the behavior, habits, and vulnerabilities and fear things that keep us kind of constantly a little bit on hyper arousal mode, then you can't, you're always a little bit on go, go, go. If you never get back to total awareness, openness, nothing, then you don't notice what's going on out there as well. Your field of focus gets narrower, and you don't have as much impact when you do finally gear up to do something. You're already halfway there. It's like having a muscle that's half contracted all the time. So when you go to really use it, you don't have much power there. You don't have as much as you could have because the muscle's already halfway in use. If it were totally relaxed and then you went to push with something, you'd have a lot more power behind it because it started from 0 instead of 50. Then you can go to 100. It's like our attention can do that too. Open, aware, not going, not directed, and then bam, off that way. Sometimes one of the things I do right now, it's not really standing around, but it's more of an awareness thing. I'm close to a lot of trees and natural settings and stuff. And I like to go out there and stand and just get my feet really comfy on the ground, feeling the ground a lot, what's there. And then I'll go up to my head and start paying attention to one sensory organ at a time. Usually I start with smell, then I add hearing, and then I add taste, and then kinesthetic sense. What do my hands feel? The back of my head, the skin, etc. Then I'll go to visual. I'll always do visual last. By the time I get to that, I'm not focused anymore. I see more clearly everything without looking at anything. It's like the bark on the tree is like stunning suddenly. It's like, you know, drugs. No, just awareness. And it's fun. And then I'll start walking, and my whole system feels like it's really settled into itself. A lot of motion, and I'm suspended and grounded at the same time. And it's lovely. It's really quite lovely, but it's not really a standing around thing, but it's kind of using the awareness attention in a different way and having fun with it, playing around. It's like eating chocolate.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I think that's really helpful.
Does anybody want to share with us some of the things you've observed happening in your systems over time? Marvin was never one to kind of process things in a chatty way after they did their standing around things. And I get it. That's fine. but I was always curious about what happened with people, you know, where did this go for people? Yeah, Ross.
Hey, yeah. So I guess it's a reflection. We haven't been doing it too long, and my whole process really is one of just unwinding. So unwinding and interrelating. So it's really beautiful to hear you talk about those aspects in particular. And I think it's about 4 weeks now. It's just really interesting. It's quite mysterious. That's kind of the word that I would just keep going back to with it. How am I relating? How's everything relating to me? And also the relationship there with the perceived observer of what's happening. And it's just a really, I guess, nice way of extending practice off the cushion and throughout the whole day. And just what you were saying about the eagles. Where we live, we've got seagulls and birds and stuff flying around. And one of the reflections I had actually was when you watch birds kind of flying, it's like minimal effort actually, when you're really kind of watching them. And I really enjoy how can I stand here with super minimal effort and not fall over? And actually the falling over has kind of happened, but how can I really kind of let go into the moment and be absorbed by it? And it's a really beautiful practice for that. And just thanks for taking the time to chat more about it with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah. And the animals are pretty cool. I've since doing this work, I've really started paying attention to, well, how do animals perceive these? I mean, what runs them? I mean, they don't have these big neocortexes that make them decide things, but like you say, they don't waste a movement. They're not out there flying or running around all the time. They kick into gear as necessary. So how does that work for them? And just trying to be more like an animal instead of a really directed human being. It's a gentler way to live.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. Kind of sums it up for me, really. And even you can see we've got a daughter here. She's pretty similar. Yeah, she's totally there, just responding and interrelating, and it's really cool. So thanks very much. And thanks, Corey, for setting it up as well. It was really decent of you, man. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Well, this is fun.
You're welcome.
One thing that,
got just a couple more minutes.
okay.
And I'd love to hear from anybody else who'd like to share. We haven't heard from a lot of you. Marilyn's been talking. That's wonderful. I'd like to hear from anybody else who'd like to say something. I'd love that.
I just have a technical question about standing around. My body doesn't want to stand around, but my feet really, really don't want to stand around. So what I find is it's just really uncomfortable for my feet. And I've never ever standing has been a thought issue, but is there, with just sticking with it, does that, in your experience, get better?
Let's see. Now, there may be things going on with your feet that aren't going to change. If you've lost all the fat pads in the bottom of your feet, they're probably not going to come back. I mean, that's just what happens. I can't wear unpadded shoes anymore myself. It's just there's not enough stuff there left. It's the way it goes. But you could, things do change, that's for sure, if you stay with it. But you can also just lay down and start feeling whatever you feel and see what happens with that. That may be the best place to start. Lay on something, not too cushy, but not a hard floor either, like carpet or something like that. And see what happens as you go with that. That might be the best place to start. They're like, I think it was Alan, there's no right or wrong, really. The starting standing is kind of generally a good thing to do, but there's nothing set in concrete, that's for sure.
I don't mind standing. It's just the flat feet, I guess. Maybe that's what it is. Thank you.
One final thing, one thing that's been a bugaboo for me with all this work is as soon as something changes, it's really hard not to expect it to happen again or something like it. And then you start looking for, I'd start looking for it. Expectation, it's one of those things our brain does. Once you've got a experience, like, whoa, we're going to do that again. And we're not going to do that again. We never do it again. The only thing I figured out how to deal with that whole expectation situation that arises is just to pay attention to it and go, oh, there's the expectation again. Put that over there and see if it can get far enough away from me that I can let whatever happened now happen. But, that's one of the downsides of a nice big brain. Keeps track of things whether you want it to or not. I think we need to learn to treat our brains just like we treat all our other organs. They have a job to do. They do it really well. Most of it's done non-consciously, and we got to keep track of the thing.
Awesome. Anyone else want to say anything? We just have like a couple minutes here. Anything else before we go?
I might try and ask something. It was quite a bit ago. You were a little bit coy about it, Corey, but you said sometimes I put questions to the non-directed, something that's going on in my life. And I was just wondering about, yeah, how do you, is that all right?
I'm sorry,
is that okay to do that? Can you put, yeah, I guess you're kind of looking for how wisdom pops up and how the question aligns with that, but sometimes that might be a bit too much doing involved, maybe.
well, in general, as much doing as you can get rid of, the better. The less you direct what you're going to pay attention to, the better. The less you try to control the whole process, the better. Because that's where we get into trouble, is controlling things before we know enough about it all to do a good job of it. If I got your question right, I'm not quite sure I heard it all. It's all very minimalist, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think this will be really helpful for people. I think people will enjoy this on YouTube also. And thank you so much, Marilyn, for sharing all that. I think it's, it's just so radical, standing around and not controlling things. This is, it's so radical, the ability to, let go of that fixer mind for a little bit is revolutionary, and then how does that change how we interact with everything? If I'm not in this manipulative mode with my life, with my body, with my experience right now, how does that relate as I walk around and instead of my projecting everything onto life, how do I feel what's going on actually and interact with it rather than try to control it all the time? It's just very different than the way most people are interacting. So anyway, thank you all so much. Really great to have you all here. And let's keep it up. Let's keep up the non-directed, the standing around. It's so beautiful. And thank you all for doing it with us. I've been waiting like 20 years. You know, I've been doing this a long time. I've been waiting 20 years to have people stand around with me. So it's such a gift that you're all doing it. So thank you. Thanks again, Marilyn.
You bet. My pleasure. This was fun. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Okay, I'm going to sign off. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.